come on in and get something to eat and take a seat. Welcome to the Fintech Meetup Track 2, Lunch and Learn. I'm Dave Birch, Director of Innovation, Global Ambassador at Consult Hyperion. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. This is the session on mastering cyber risk management, innovating to stay ahead of the cyber criminals, innovating being the key word, by the way, for all of this. And joining me on stage for the discussion is Steve Sukup, CEO of Defensestorm. So what we're going to do is Steve's going to give you a short presentation to set out some of the ground. And then Steve and I are going to talk on stage, just a friendly chat to explore some of these issues. And if you want to join in the conversation at any point, please do. Because it's lunch and learn, like it's not like school lunch and learn. Like this isn't like you're taking notes, there's going to be a test. That'd be a misreading of what's going on here. This is lunch and learn as in come and join in the conversation, and then we'll all learn together. Because the reason I'm here is because I want to learn too. So please join in the conversation. Okay, Steve, I think we should get things started even though people are still eating, because otherwise we'll run too far behind. So just take it away, people will relax and sit down and they'll listen.
Perfect.
And we'll have a discussion afterwards.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Good afternoon. When I go back, I need to thank the marketing team for a very scintillating title when everybody's just had lunch, right? Like you're in a food coma and we've got a long title. I think the key to it, though, is innovating to stay ahead of cyber criminals. So let's try and get a little participation. Why in the world would we want to innovate to stay ahead of cyber criminals? Let's start with a little audience participation. Has anyone ever played this game before? You know what it is?
I do.
Whack-a-mole, right? You've played it before? How confident do you feel when you play it? You're going to crush every mole when that little head pops out of the ground. 100%? 50%? Higher? I'm calling out you, the gentleman in the middle of the room. 100%. Okay. I don't buy it. I'm going to test you later. We've got a whack-a-mole at our booth. I'm going to ask you to come by and show me 100%. We're going to turn it up to expert level. The reason we do this is, if you think about information security and cybersecurity, this is the game that we've been playing for decades, right? Whack-a-mole. We're trying to stay one step ahead and hope that we hit as many of these as we can before they cause a problem. Hence, I think there's a better way. I think there's a need to innovate. Oop, I was going to do more. Dang it. I just spoiled my reveal. I was going to ask you to close your eyes for a moment. When you think about a cyber threat, when you think about a breach, close your eyes. Tell me what image you picture. This is an easy one for participants. Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, yes. That's what we picture, right? The disaffected youth with a hoodie in a dark room in a basement at some grandmother's place in Romania just kind of having laughs and giggles at our expense. Here's the reality. The threat actors, the bad actors, whether they're nation states or more likely commercial enterprises, this is real business for them. This is real business. It's not just for kicks and giggles. It's to make money and often to fund other kind of untoward activities, right? So most cyber criminals are funding things like meth labs, human trafficking, you name it, anything kind of corrupt. This is the source of funds for those businesses. And they run them like real businesses. Has anybody ever seen the dark web? You've been on the dark web or seen the dark web? I saw it for the first time like 5 or 6 years ago and it blew my mind. And somebody asked me to describe it and I said, this is like eBay for bad guys, right? I want 500 Capital One debit cards, it's X price. Oh, I want them to include PIN numbers, it's X plus Y, right? That's what's happening at the end of this thing. So we need to adjust our approach. So let's stop for a minute. We serve banks and credit unions. I think that's probably most of what's here today, financial institutions. Here's why we think innovation is necessary and a different approach is necessary. There are 5 factors that make this business different. The first is the high value assets that you hold. Those are either the dollars that you keep on deposit or the data that you have about your account holders or members. That's very valuable, and that's the stuff that they're trying to get into to abscond with to fund those untoward activities that I talked about. Second piece is a complex technology environment. I couldn't help but think of this as I was in the speed dating room earlier today, right? Watching everybody get pitched by hundreds of fintechs that are trying to get you to spend money on transforming your financial institution in some way. It's happening, and it's happening all the time, and it's a great thing. It's a great thing to see financial institutions adopting and adapting new technology in service to growth. It's also just inherently a very kind of complex technology environment. If you think about this is going from back office to front office, but you've got your core processing system, your money transfer systems, everything that's moving around things on the back office. Then what I call the middle office, anything that's agent or employee assisted. So I go into one of your branches, I call one of your call centers. There's a human being interacting with me and the technology. And then this wave of digital transformation that we've been talking about for years, which like most evolutions in banking, is supposed to kind of wipe out all the old and replace it with something newer, more convenient, more efficient. It's just another layer on top. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a reality of what you're dealing with. Third piece, constrained resources. Almost everyone I meet with or my team meets with is wearing multiple hats. I'm Ted, I'm the director of IT and IS. What does that entail? And the laundry list of tasks that they have to handle every day is amazing. It's astounding. And I think it's driven in part by, I don't know of many other industries that have this thing called an efficiency ratio, right? A key financial metric that manages your ability to do more with less virtually every day. Lastly, burdensome regulations, everybody's fun topic. I don't know of a more prescriptive set of regulations around an industry, maybe with the exception of healthcare, than what banking is dealing with these days, and it's getting more and more prescriptive. And then finally, there's a community responsibility piece. So whether you're a credit union that is dedicated to a certain geography, or a community bank or a regional bank that's operating in certain towns and states, there's a real kind of fiduciary responsibility to the folks that you serve. We have a client, it was a founding client, about a $3 billion bank down in Waxahachie, Texas. I always bring them up because I like to say Waxahachie. I think it's a fun word. They're quoted on our website though, and it's their CEO saying, the people that I bank are the people that I see every day. I see them at the school, I see them at the church, I see them at the hamburger shop that's on that graphic there, and I have a serious responsibility to protect their data and protect their money, and I take it damn seriously. So when you combine those 5 pillars, whether you're a practitioner who's dealing with this struggle and getting the brunt of the change and the advancement and all the regulatory pieces, or you're an executive who from the top is making big strategic decisions in service to advancing your institution, like the 5 kind of all come together and they make that whack-a-mole game all the more challenging. So threats are changing constantly. We've hit this at some level, but really it's driven by 2 factors. The external ones that we talked about at the beginning, and the internal ones that we're causing or driving or being a catalyst of ourselves. And so because of that, we think cyber really shouldn't be treated as just an IT issue anymore. It needs to be treated as a risk management issue. And that's especially true in banking. I've been in the space for a long time. I'm a recovering banker myself. I've sold banking technology for more decades than I'd like to admit. But there's one thing that you all are great at your core, and that is managing risk. And if you think about the tools and the talent and the technology and the KPIs that you line up to manage all of your financial risks, and compare it to what your financial institution often, I won't say always, but often is stacking up against a risk like this, and you think about, as Gartner says, your average ransomware attack is going to cost you somewhere between $4.2 and $5.6 million. That's a massive exposure. And being satisfied that, hey, 6 months ago, a junior accountant from the NCUA or the FDIC came in to look at our balance sheet and said we were good, and then asked me 3 questions about our InfoSec problem and said, hey, no findings. It is not time to relax, right? But this isn't about fear, it's about hope. And we think that if you can get more proactive and get more innovative, you can get ahead of the hope and lose some of the fear. And so, hence our supposition to address this constantly changing landscape from a risk management standpoint. I'm a little distracted by the camera. I have a habit of hamming it up when I see a camera, so I almost gave him one of those, so thank you. So how do we do that? There's 4 components. We'll get into the meat of this with Dave in a second, but basically, and I'm probably preaching to the choir on some of this, At your baseline, you need to assess risk, right? Where are we at? What's inherent based on the size, scope, and dynamics of my institution? What's dynamic based on strategic initiatives that we're undertaking? Now we've got a baseline, and we look at governance, which in this discipline is ultimately about what are the policies and controls that I'm going to put in place to address that risk. And we like to think about those with three simple kind of framing questions, which are we doing the right things? Are we doing them correctly and on time? And how do we know? To me, this is the daily hygiene of how you manage cyber as a risk. Third piece is ensuring security. What has traditionally been whack-a-mole. You can start to get a lot more proactive and a lot more strategic about how you do it when those other basic building blocks are in place. And then ultimately, it sets you up to prevent fraud. To me, this is always the so what and who cares of why we're even in this room talking about these things. And that ties back directly to that first differentiator that we talked about, the precious assets that you hold, because those are the target. That is what makes you in the crosshairs of the threat actors. So if we can do all this in service to stopping things before they ever leave your financial institutions, save you hard dollar costs, but save you massive soft dollar costs and reputational risk, it can be very, very compelling. All that accounting for the change that we're driving and that the threat actors are driving. It's interesting when we talk about the threat actors and them being essentially businesses, enterprises. Somebody asked me this question the other day, and I thought it was it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but you've probably picked up that's a little bit of my style already anyway. They said, like, when's the last time you saw the threat actor roadmap? How many times a year are they publishing that thing, right? That's the one place where they're not like your basic business, right? They're not publishing something that says, Jenny, in the next 4 months, these are the 4 attack vectors we're going to take to your financial institution in Ottawa, Canada next year, which is part of what makes this a game of whack-a-mole. So, $860,000. I told you we started out, we want to get more strategic, we want to get less reactive, more proactive, start to manage our risk. This is a story of a bank who's a client of ours who made some strategic changes to how they do business. They saw the need to address what they knew would be a broader threat landscape based on those strategic changes. They partnered with Defensestorm, and in one morning, we were able to stop 86 attempted intrusions / fraudulent account openings and movements, valued at about $10,000 per pop, and we saved them $860,000 in one morning. It's not a bad half day's work, right? And I think it speaks to everything that we spoke about in terms of the complex environment, the always dynamic changes that we're dealing with, the forward-thinking threat actors, and the impact you can have on getting a little bit innovative and being more proactive, less reactive. Sorry, whack-a-mole, I think it's time to end that game, and now is the time to do it. So, that's me. That's how to get in touch with me and our company, but how about we chat for a bit?
Thanks, Sebastian. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thanks very much for framing the problem there. So, I want to start by asking. Oh, by the way, I was going to say a quick question for the audience. So, on the way in, I happened to bump into one of my go-to cybersecurity guys, Seb Tavo, who's sitting over there. Seb wrote a great book called The Delivery Man, based on his experiences of bringing products into being at PayPal, MasterCard, places like that. So I happen to have a signed copy of Seb's book, which I'm going to give to the person who asks the best question. So I don't want to make it hyper-competitive, but I just want you to realize there's something up for grabs here. I've got a copy of the book. It's going to the best question. Just bear that in mind before you ask your question. That's all. I don't want to set people against other people, but you know, it's America. It's part of the.
Who defines best?
Yeah, exactly.
You?
So, of course.
Okay. So we're clear.
And I can tell you right now, the decision will be arbitrary and capricious. So there's no point appealing it to senior management. There's nothing there. So let's start the discussion, and we'll see the questions as they come in. So I want to take you back to the very beginning because when I was looking through your slides earlier on, the first thing that caught me was right at the very beginning, which is the nature of this threat. So I don't know, sometimes I think people have a sort of kind of almost romanticized idea, you know, it's banks, they're stupid, if they can't do their security properly, who cares, they deserve to be robbed, it's a victimless crime, and by the way, it's some poor kid, you know, who's, you know what I mean? Like, there is a kind of romanticized, as you made it very clear, this is a business.
Absolutely.
So what are the dynamics in that business right now?
The volume
Which is out of control.
up and to the right massively, right? So when you think about that whack-a-mole dynamic that we're talking about, we have about 180 financial institutions on our platform, and on average, every day, they're sending us over 100 million events. That's on average. I have some that are sending billions, and some that are sending a little more than that. But just from a volume standpoint, that's the haystack that we're trying to find a needle in right now, and that's insane. I think the other dynamic is just the pace of, I hate to use the word innovation because it almost legitimizes those businesses, but it's what they're doing.
But that was something that came up on stage this morning, which is the innovation is driving the fraud, and it should be driving the response as well. But actually, there's kind of an imbalance there because the fraudsters are picking up the new technology and using it. They don't have to go through committees or ethics monitoring or ROI or like they just pick it up and do
They
it.
don't need to publish a roadmap, right?
Yeah,
Like we said, they just do it.
Your customers are dealing with it every day.
Absolutely.
So the scale of that threat has changed, recently. But it's also become harder to deal with because those guys are smart. We've gone from the days of simple scripts and so what are the kinds of frauds that you're seeing? I mean, I understand that the scale is going up, but what's the nature of the frauds? It's account takeover. What are the frauds that you're seeing?
Account takeover is probably the biggest that we see right now. Check washing is a huge one. I heard about one this morning.
Check washing? What's checks?
We
It's an American
Yeah,
thing.
we still
No,
have
I forgot about.
still
Sorry,
have
yeah,
it
the
in the
paper
States,
thing.
right? That was part of the paperless 90s going
Yeah, I
on, right?
remember that now. Yes, it's all coming back to me. That's
So I talked about myself as a recovering banker. 25 years ago, I was selling positive pay to commercial customers to kill that, and we thought it went away, and poof, it's back, right? Like fashion and everything else, like everything is cyclical, right?
like vital records.
But I was talking with a banker this morning in speed dating, and they were talking about a scam where the fraudster actually sent an Uber to the customer under the guise of high touch, high net worth to retrieve a debit card that was erroneously sent to them. And they're doing this at scale, right? To get it back and get the PIN and everything else that goes with it.
I never thought of that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, so and it's not all just kind of hacks and massive DDoS attacks. It's like trench warfare, right? It's happening all over, all the time. That's the headline you should take from this.
I should do that. In case this whole kind of consulting thing doesn't work.
Okay.
No, but it's a great idea. So I call up somebody and I say, oh, this is the bank. We sent you the wrong debit card. I'm going to send a guy around in a new.
All sorts of bank impersonation scams going on.
And people give them to them.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
If you're the fraudster, it is.
Yeah, no, that's the business.
Yeah.
Give me a couple more examples. I'm curious about this.
The best one I have is the one I shared with that bank in the southeast. That what was interesting was the way we caught them. It was just a band of folks, and often you catch them because suddenly you'll see 500 of my customers are all suddenly trying to access the bank from either the same zip code or the same IP address, right? They're good, but they're not always the most. But if you think back to that volume of 100 million events a day, that's impossible for the naked eye to catch, right? You have to have the right technology and instrumentation to be able to do that. The other place they screwed up is, so they open these accounts with identities that they perpetrated, right? And then they start changing emails and phone numbers, right? So that they can bypass one-time authentication or one-time passcodes. And suddenly the system detected that the domain that they were changing all of these emails to was one that was unrecognized, right?
That thing about changing the. But again, I'm sort of angry with banks in a way about that because because a lot of them still use SMS OTP for sort of some kind of, and really they should be using proper authentication.
I don't get angry at banks.
They're making it easy
They
for
keep
them.
the lights on.
So, okay, so this business that you're helping clients to defend against is a business which innovates quickly, has, from what you've just told me, a good ROI. It has let's tell you one thing, when I was in New York last time in January, there's a fantastic fraud. If you guys want a great fraud, here's a great fraud. This is in New York in January. They'd gone into Google Maps and changed the phone numbers for the airlines at JFK. So when people's flights were late, instead of looking up the airline they were just going to go to Google Maps to the terminal, and just getting the phone number from that. And so they thought they were calling Delta, but really they were calling fraudsters and giving them their card numbers and stuff like that. And there's a guy they interviewed for it, and he said, "I feel really stupid. I fell for this scam. I feel really stupid." He said, "I should have known it wasn't the airline because when I called, somebody answered." Should have alerted him straight away. But the point is, a simple thing like that, like changing the phone number, is all these guys need to get going, right? And then they have your whole life.
They're also playing a long game, right? So you hear more and more about scams that when you trace them back to their root, they started months ago, right? They started with a simple change of address on account. And then I'm establishing transaction history in this new geography or this new address, right? And then I'm starting to slowly but surely change all my contact information,
right?
And then
it builds.
And months later. But again, this isn't a one-off with, the kid in sweat in the hoodie in a basement. This is a criminal enterprise.
No, that's what I picked up right at the beginning of the slide. So in order to work out what to do, organizations need to do proper risk analysis, just as like table stakes, right? I mean, like everybody does basic risk analysis, don't they? I mean, every bank does like basic risk analysis they tick a box that says they've done some basic risk.
Some.
Which isn't quite.
I don't want to paint with a broad. It's not like everybody's.
No. But the point is, if they had done it, you wouldn't see all these frauds all the time. So clearly, something's going wrong in that loop. Like you said, the bank inspectors. So they come and say, "Well, have you done your cyber security, or whatever?" And someone will just tick a box and say yes.
Right.
But obviously they haven't. Otherwise, there wouldn't be these massive amounts of fraud. So something's got to change at a different level as well. When I was looking at your website, because obviously I didn't know you guys before, so when I was looking at your website, one of the things that caught my eye was you were talking about this idea, you said governance on but this idea of kind of like more active governance that seemed to me to be like an interesting step forward. So how does that work in your platform?
So when you think about governance, I'll go back to that framework, right? Are we doing the right things? How do you define the right things? They're either the policies that we've put in place to address our risks, they're standards like NIST, right, or assessments that have been put forth by NCUA or FDIC, right? We know what the right things are. So are we doing them? One way you measure you're doing them is that you set up tasks and task schedules associated with them so that you can measure in real time. Hey, Dave is assigned with checking our privileged user access controls at some regular interval. Is it happening? And when it doesn't happen and Dave's a day late or 2 hours late or whatever, who knows about it, right? Those are the places where people get caught, right? Little things happen that open cracks that become huge gaps. So then the second piece is, are we doing them correctly and on time? I talked about that a little bit in my proof and escalation piece. And then the last piece is like, how do we know? And that's where I think this is broken, right? I think banks and credit unions are doing risk assessments and they are putting policies and controls in place. They're just not reviewing them with the same at the same cadence that they are financial risks, right? I mentioned how long I've been in the space. It took me a long time to figure this out, but there's a dynamic when you're calling on banks and credit unions a lot of times. I'm sure our sales team that's here will chuckle at this. Hey, I can't talk to you for the next 45 days, Dave. Why is that? Well, the examiners are coming in. Oh, okay. Like, tomorrow? No, they're coming in 45 days, and then they'll be with us for 30 days. And what a lot of folks will admit offline, I'm sure I won't ask anybody to do it here, is sometimes we're spending time getting ready, by going back and checking all the things we should have been looking at every day and saying, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure we did that last Tuesday and 3 Wednesdays ago and 5 Fridays ago. Because there's not the instrumentation, the tools, the technology, and the talent in place to do it all the time in real time. And that's really how you make sure
but
you're
in
safe.
a real-time system.
Absolutely.
You could imagine a system where the examiners have got essentially a dashboard into your system. Like if I'm the examiner, there should be a red light goes on my desk if this stuff isn't being done. I don't have to wait until I turn up once a year to see whether you did it or not.
Right.
It should be, so as we move...
Well, I think a better mechanism is that the chief risk officer or somebody in the financial institution is looking at that red light, because somebody's going to give their examiner the access to that.
No, but your point about the transition to real time, I think it's important, as we need the tools to manage that. And of course, we're going from a situation where in the US kind of infrastructure was a little outdated. It was a little, now we're moving into a world of FedNow and TCH and James Anderson was talking about pays yesterday. Like that really does kind of crank up the settings on risk. So it isn't good enough anymore just to sort of now and then dip into that.
Right.
So I think this more active approach, that resonates with me as kind of a way forward. So thanks for confirming that kind of thing. Now, when you said that actually there's one other kind of thing I want to ask about, because you're closer to the stuff than I am, but one other sort of thing that bothers me about the scale of these frauds not being dealt with is you talked about the sort of reputational risk to the bank, and I kind of understand that. But I also feel at the moment there's like a risk to the sector as a whole. People's confidence in the sector is being undermined because every day in the paper they read these stories literally every day about people who had their life savings stolen and someone got into their bank account and looted it. I mean, I have a news thing, so I probably see more of those stories than other people do. But the average person sees those stories every day. Their confidence in the financial system as a whole, right now, I think is being undermined because stuff like this isn't being taken seriously at the level it should be. And in many cases, it's still seen as an IT problem. Right? It's not even seen as like a bank governance problem. So I think if we can somehow persuade the industry to work more at that sort of governance level, I think that moves us forward a bit.
You've been a little doom and gloom on some things. That's an area where I'd give you some hope because in years of working with banks and credit unions, that's one area where I do see a fair amount of collaboration, right? And so we do a lot of threat sharing within our platform, and it's the Hatfields and the McCoys, the banks and the credit unions, or even competitive banks sharing data about threats, be they cyber threats or fraud threats, for exactly that reason.
Right.
Because it's not just a me problem, it's an us problem as it relates to the whole vertical. And again, you think about this conference, and there are lots of options out there to hold and move money.
No, I think there are lots of people who have good tech. I think we can all admit it's not only you guys. There are lots of people that have some good technological solutions. I think what I found more interesting about it wasn't just the technology.
Yeah.
It was that framework that went around it. But yes, we need everybody to up on those things. So let me ask you a little bit about where this is going. Because in the session this morning, I was talking to Johnny Irons. He was talking about how the nature of AI is changing this threat. So the next wave of fraud that's going to come over us is actually going to be slightly different because they're going to use AI as a tool. So I don't want you to give away your top secret R&D plans, but I'm guessing that AI is pretty central to your evolution, your sort of next stages. So how are you seeing that at the moment? Because is it quite ready for prime time yet, or are you already building stuff?
Yeah, there are components of AI that have been in our platform for a long time, and just things like. Here's the other thing I'll caution: it's a term that's being overused, blanketed across the problem, blanketed across the solution. It is a little bit of the wild, wild west too, so we're being pretty measured in how we use it. But there are machine learning tools and anomaly detection tools and behavioral analytics tools that we have been and will continue to use to try to combat.
I do think you have a point actually. If you walk around, like all of a sudden everything is everything is AI powered.
Yeah.
Like a couple of years ago, it was blockchain powered.
Right.
You know, when we come back.
Well, like Gen AI, everybody's using it as just a generic term. And somebody was like, well, what are you doing about Gen AI to stop fraud? I was like, I haven't really thought about it, because to me, Gen AI is like, I'm going to go to my computer and say, do I have something to worry about in terms of fraud? It's not there yet, right? And I don't mean to, demean anybody that says that.
No, I just think the use of the buzzwords, sometimes it's very confusing. So we went to, I did a panel session at another conference a little while back, and I forgot to fill out their form about this. So as I'm going in, they said, like, what is the session called? Because I didn't fill out their stupid form. So I just said, as a joke, oh, it's the AI, it's the AI powered quantum blockchain in the cloud.
Oh, nice.
I just made it up, right? So I get that.
You forgot big data.
Yeah,
Otherwise
I
we were
put big
good.
data in the book. I had, and they'll tell you this is true, the organisers had 2 emails from people complaining that during the session we hadn't talked about the AI powered quantum blockchain in the cloud. Like, it doesn't mean anything, but people
I don't mean to make light of it though, because to your initial point,
it's not helpful to the industry just to see all these buzzwords.
it's another vector that you have to consider, because if we go back to the premise that the threat actors are legitimate business, well, not legitimate, they're businesses.
They're businesses.
They are innovating. They are applying technology. They will apply this technology. They are applying this technology. They'll continue to.
Not just as a buzzword.
Not just as a buzzword.
Okay, so let's look forward then. So as I said, don't give away any top secret plans, but I am being a bit doom and gloomish. But that's because I see the figures. Like, I see the figures and okay, I know the UK figures in more detail than the US figures, but the UK figures are, fraud is about half of all recorded crime at the moment. Actually in the UK, about 1/6 of all recorded crime comes from one company, which is Meta, because an inordinate proportion of these frauds start with WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook Marketplace. So the big banks in the UK, Barclays, TSB and so on, they say 80% of their fraud is coming from these places. So I know those figures. So I am a little bit doom and gloom, because I just keep seeing those numbers going up and up and up. And nothing effectively is being done about it on the law enforcement side. They can't, they just don't have the resources. So we rely on infrastructure providers to really do something about it. And so that's why I'm kind of pushing you a bit on, okay, well this all sounds good, but where are you going with this? What are you actually going to do to protect us in the future?
One thing I'll put out, might shift gears a little bit here, it's not a pure technology play, it's a mindset play. We were on the phone with a large credit union this morning. I had a similar conversation with a large bank last week. If you think about the cyber security mindset versus the traditional financial institution fraud mindset, a lot of times the fraud mindset is, hey, we've got a budget of acceptable losses, right? I might have hit this a little bit earlier. I can lose $20 million this year, and I'm within budget. So if I lose 19.5, it's a good year, Dave. The cyber mindset, like if you're an ISO in the room or a CISO in the room, like 0 intrusions, 0 malware, 0 breaches, right? It's 0, 0, 0. The good news is we're starting to see the 2 disciplines come together. So fraud has really been a very reactive discipline. We're starting to see things like fraud prevention departments instead of fraud reclamation, fraud, BSA, AML filing stuff. A lot of that still has to go on. But like, to us, that's a hallelujah moment, because it's a vindication of this position we've been talking about all day. There is a way to put the 2 together and go on the offensive and not wait for it to happen and stop it before it happens. And I think you're starting to see it in larger financial institutions, and like a lot of trends, it's kind of working its way down. Neither of the ones that I'm talking about that we've had conversations with in the last 2 weeks are massive, maybe a $5 billion and $10 billion institution. I think that's a big part of the future. And I don't mean to get all squishy and off the technology track, but there is a mindset piece that can cause some shifts in strategy and in tactics that will help solve this problem.
Okay. No, I think you're right about that, absolutely. Okay, I saved you a couple of minutes at the end to do the actual sales pitch. So if I'm an institution and I decide to choose to go with you guys, what do I do? What are you actually selling? APIs, software as a service, or something in the cloud?
Yeah,
what are you actually selling, Steve?
It's a cloud-based platform that's offered with some co-managed services to enable some of the technology, depending on what the resources are, with, shocker, 4 modules that match those 4 modules of how you manage risk: automated risk assessment, what you would call active compliance or active governance, a threat surveillance piece that includes 24/7 by 365 monitoring for the threat piece out there, along with some surrounding kind of traditional cyber services, and then the fraud detection piece that will help stop data and dollars from leaving your institution before it happens. From a company that for 10 years has been solely focused on the banking vertical, that has a net promoter score north of 70 every single time we pull it. 55, by the way, is considered best in class, and a retention statistic of 97% logo retention year over year over year over year. We're really proud of that, because in a space where you've got thousands of people that would die to do business with you, you've got plenty of options. Our clients don't leave us because we deliver, and knock on wood, we deliver results and follow through on those promises day after day.
What's the typical time scale for bringing the product up and running?
Now I feel like I'm at the cheesy infomercial stage.
No, but you have to, like, we're all in business, and there are people in the audience who want to know, okay, if I buy it, what happens?
Yeah, we can get people up and running, ingesting data and combating this stuff in 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, that's a key.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So time to value is pretty quick.
No, thank you, being strong. Okay, so let me summarize by saying then that we're in a situation which I think is quite catastrophic, because if you look at the actual numbers about fraud, it's completely out of control, and the losses are astronomical. But there are some rays of light here, because it's not just about having sort of technology products which can do these detections. Like as you said, it's to do with mindset, governance. That's where we're seeing things begin to change. And I also want you to feel optimistic about the fact that the tools that we have available to us now are very different from the tools that we had even just a couple of years ago. So it isn't just about AI. There's a lot of other stuff going on in security, post-quantum security, homomorphic encryption, all these kind of things. So actually, the space is developing. So no matter how gloomy I set things out at the beginning, I want you to take some very positive messages from what Steve said. And if you want to step up, there's a sales guy over there with an order pad. We're all in business. Just please form an orderly queue, and we'll move on from there. I want to tell you, Steve didn't know the questions I was going to ask him. He gave you his honest, professional opinion from a very important perspective, and I hope you'll thank him for it as much as I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Going to give anybody a chance to win a book?
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Oh, nobody asked a question, so...
Well, you asked all the questions.
That means I'll have to... Please. Ask a question. By the way, you'll automatically win, so you're on a roll.
Yes, my question's like, a lot of banks are using you have a login and a password, and now you're using a phone verification. Are all usernames and passwords a big source of penetration to the fraud, or can some of it eliminate by just using two-factor or three-factor authentication for users that are consumers on their website, or is it much bigger and worse than that, and that's not even the way to solve it?
Do a lot of your guys still use usernames and passwords?
Absolutely. And I would say this, if you're thinking about this from a banking customer problem, that's part of it. The other part is like, what are you using internally to keep your own folks from getting compromised? So, like, sometimes the solve is really simple. We use a password vault like Keeper all the time. You know one password, which is your password to your vault, and your system knows every other one. Like, little things like that can make a massive difference. We don't do penetration testing anymore, but when we used to, our former CISO, like, he made a sport of it. You knew Bob was going to go out on the road and do a pen test for somebody, because suddenly it was like Robert De Niro in like a movie. He like put on 20 pounds, he grew a beard, he grew his hair out, he looked like hell, and he put on a FedEx uniform. And he would find his way to a server room somewhere, and This will give you an idea. It was back a ways, right? But you go and look at a Windows password where the user ID was admin, and the password was 1 through 9. And stuff like that is just so easy to fix and solve. And like this isn't a pitch for us, obviously, because I don't sell password vaults, but things like that where you're just forcing complex credentials as a way to access can have an outsized impact.
So the answer is yes, it is as bad as you think. But actually not for me, because my passwords are on a post-it note, but my post-it note is on the back of the monitor. So pro tip, by the way. Thank you very much, Steve. It was
Thanks,
fantastic.
Dave.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.